while your day is winding down. They're just getting started. This is South Coast Tonight with Chris McCarthy and Marcus Farrow. They've got you covered on all the news of the day, from local issues to politics on both sides of the aisle. This is the place where the movers and shakers come to be heard, to listen, and where they're held accountable. This is South Coast Tonight on WBSM.
Welcome to South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus.
And I'm Chris.
So,
Marcus,
what are the people getting tonight?
Well, all right. So here's what we're going to have. It's going to be Marcus. It's going to be Chris. And it's going to be you, the callers. 508-996-0500. We purposely booked no guests because we feel like we haven't talked to you guys enough lately.
We haven't. We haven't had a free flowing conversation in some time. We appreciate our guests.
We love our guests, and but we really love the audience more because they're more frequent than the guests, quite frankly, right?
Yeah, of course.
They're more important. Without the audience,
yeah,
we quite frankly don't exist.
That's true. So
we hope to speak with you tonight, but there's a lot of things on the table. Let's set the table. First of all, if you got a chance, if you didn't get a chance, we had a really great interview last week at the end of the week with the Lieutenant Governor. Mm-hmm. And Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, the recording is up at our podcast. Plus, there's an article that Marcus has about it, which also has a link to the podcast if you want to catch the highlights.
Yeah, so there's an article that has the portion of our interview which was about housing, basically.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of other areas covered in the interview. But, some of the points she hit on housing is covered in our column. But she also talks about offshore wind. She also talks about Sergeant Mike Cassidy.
Right.
She also talks about the Community Preservation Act.
Right.
So that's all in light of what Council President Morad's trying to do to repeal it. So
and let's remember, Marcus. So a majority of the council is joined with her.
Yeah. But even though they don't want to.
It's a very weird thing. I feel like they're going to have an opportunity to get out of that vote.
Well, they are. They're going to have an opportunity to get out of that vote because what we've learned is that the mayor is going to veto those. We have confirmation on that, right?
Absolutely. He gave a quote to Jack Spillane.
Yep.
He gave a quote, I believe, to a couple other people, but also we know to Timmy Dunn, who used to be here, who's now at WBZ.
Yeah.
In fact, he said this on Twitter. Tim Dunn said, I've just, spoken to the mayor after the New Bedford Half Marathon, and he's now heading back to his office to write a veto letter for all three of those proposals. So, we know the mayor is going to veto it, which means it'll go back to the council, which then the council will have an opportunity to either override the veto or not do it. So the councilors who weirdly voted for this CPA vote, even though they insisted they all love the CPA, it was really weird, right? It was like there was a Jim Jones.
It's like they were all just doing whatever Linda asked them to do.
I was going to say a Jim Jones cult.
Oh, yeah.
Mind control cult, right? Yeah. I don't want to drink the Kool-Aid, but Linda's passing it out, so let's all take a big gulp. Mm-hmm. It really and I know that metaphor has been overused perhaps by Howie Carr.
Yes.
But it's apropos, really, to the situation.
It's
It's appropriate, right? How can you say, I'm for the CPA, and particularly all the great things it does.
Yeah.
But I'm also against it.
Right. Move your mic up.
I thought you were telling me I had something on my lip. So, the city council, and we're not here to just beat up on the city council.
No, it's exhausting.
It's funny. We talked about it off the air.
Yeah.
We said, but it's just so egregious.
Yeah, the whole thing's pretty egregious, and it's inexplicable and it's indefensible.
Today, listening to Jack Spillane with Tim, I think all of us in the media have come to the agreement that based on the various things that city councils have said, this is nothing more than a ruse to get voters out.
Yeah.
Either to vote for them or to vote against the mayor.
And
it's a variety of tricks.
It's kind of this thing like, let's just ask people a bunch of stuff.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
And here's the thing.
It's nothing that's ever happened before, right? No council or even mayor has ever been like, all right, hey, listen, this year, we're just going to ask everybody a bunch of stuff.
Right. For the first time ever.
We're just going to ask you stuff. Right. It doesn't, and a bunch of stuff.
And here's the thing. I'm not opposed to asking the public's opinion. But let's not pretend that asking non-binding referendums is somehow doing anything.
No, it's not.
You've had a lot of time to work on solutions. You didn't do anything. So now you say, for instance, they could have pointed out to projects they didn't think the CPA should be funding and use their city council power to object, get a record going, right?
Yeah.
They could have used the housing committee to come up with solutions for housing. They didn't do it. I recognize that they've done some. Carl Alves has done a lot of work in the private home group. But number one, Carl Alves isn't on the city council. Number two, those aren't on the record. They're not public documents. And it's not his responsibility to create public documents. It's Councilor Burgos.
The home group that Councilor Alves and Burgo are spearheading has been an absolute net positive contribution to housing issues. However, you build momentum by getting stuff that's public record. And listen, I've highlighted the home group here a bunch of times.
Certainly.
And
in fact, you announced it, I think. Oh,
yeah. Actually, I had
you had Carl on.
I had Shane on.
Shane, I thought Carl was on too as well. But
I've had Shane and Carl on. Yeah, but I first had Shane when I was on Saturdays. I first had Shane on to talk about it, and I wrote the first piece of media on the home group. But. And it's a fantastic work. They've got HUD coming down in a month, and I'm going to be there.
Look, all that is true.
But you've got to build momentum in the public sphere. And the way you do that is have these meetings that, have people in. It's kind of amazing.
That are subject to the records law.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. Right? Yeah, and get these opinions on the record. That's how you build momentum towards something. Right. So, one of the things I was thinking of, and I said this on the air, I said Shane has, in proposing this rent stabilization question to whether or not, to have an ordinance, a prelude to an ordinance. Has actually really supercharged a conversation about housing in a way that it wasn't had before, and that's good. Having said that, I think that's also a point of criticism for what you said about having too few meetings in the housing committee, because if you, as in your position of power, are able to do that with just a few words, just an hour appearance on this show,
right?
Imagine if you start building that momentum in the city council.
And look, and to create public record, not just your opinion, but look, he had in people from the city, people from outside the city, legitimate people. He had, for instance, Josh Amaro, who's a legitimate guy, has been involved in the housing issue for a long time. He's now director of housing and community development. He had him in, started to create a record, but the meeting was over, right? But that's a building block to part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Look, I went through the minutes of every one of those meetings. I would have been happy to go through the minutes for 15 meetings.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there were only 3.
Yeah.
So, but the point being is that the home group, as good as it is still a relatively secret, no public disclosure, no public record meeting. There's nothing wrong with that, except that it's not a public meeting, and it doesn't count, I guess is the way to put it. So here we are. The other point is, folks, 15 months went by with no work, little work. Now you come up, we're at a crisis. I don't disagree with that at all in the housing sector. But now you're going to push this off for years more. You've burnt through 2 years almost, and now you're pushing it a year or two more down the line after the opinion poll comes in. It's just, and the only reason, again, as we agreed, Jack Spillane said it here today, Tim agreed, Marcus agrees, I agree, and you callers, I want to hear if you agree. This is nothing but a ruse, all three of them, to try to drive up voter participation in favor of the council and in opposition to the mayor.
I would feel differently if the rent stabilization, rent control question was just there on its own.
If it was a standalone question.
But it's made to look like next to these two completely inane questions, right? It's really diluted the impact of that question to have it next to those two. So now even if that is sincere on Councilor Burgo's part, and I don't doubt that it is.
I think he's totally sincere.
But I don't know if
ineffective, but sincere.
I don't think his colleagues are, I don't think some of his colleagues are as sincere about it. And again, if it were just this question, I would say yeah, but I would say yeah, this is maybe a real effort. But now it's this question plus this stupid question on the CPA and the question on whether or not you're basically a referendum. They're trying to put a referendum on Mitchell on the ballot.
Correct.
With the 2 to 4 year term.
Run a candidate, for God's sakes.
Yeah, run yourself.
Right. That's the other thing, Marcus.
Yeah.
Marcus, nobody is stopping anybody from running against John Mitchell.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, and look, again, maybe they're trying to set the conversation. But as Jack Spillane said today on Tim Weisberg's show, he's tired of seeing the New Bedford City Council bend the entire government apparatus to make a political point.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a very strong observation by Jack Spillane.
Well, I mean, we talked about it off air today. Look about when she wasn't council president, but when she was first vice president, Linda Moorhead, she took over a meeting that Ian couldn't make because Ian was away on vacation wherever he was. He wasn't available. So she took over a meeting. And in that meeting, they took the capital plan expenditures and they kicked it. They kicked it 2-3 weeks down to the next meeting. They referred it back to it was there to be approved. She took the lead in the meeting. She got it kicked. I think it was a month later, right? So that means it took another month for it to get back to the committee. Then it took another month for it to get back to the mayor, to get to the mayor's desk, right? Basically, it took another 2-3 months. Something that could have been approved in late July ended up being approved in October because Councilor Morad wanted to take a stand against capital expenditure, even though she knows that it's borrowing and that you've got to do it while the interest rates are lower.
Right.
Otherwise, they're probably going to go up.
And what happened?
Which they did. And in that, they kicked out a capital expenditure of $200,000 and like a multi-million-dollar borrowing that would have rehabbed the downtown police station into a government office for housing and community development.
Is that what they want to do with it? And look,
housing and community development. So don't tell me that the same city councilor that gutted $200,000 of funding for the housing community development that wants to gut tens of millions of dollars in funding, a lot of which is earmarked to go towards housing. Don't tell me that same councilor is serious about addressing the housing crisis and are serious about rent control or rent stabilization.
Look, I know. Look, I have to tell you something. That I have never been more disappointed with Linda and some of the other counselors than on
but this chaos started when she took the reins. And if you're going to take a leadership role, you're going to take the responsibility of what happens.
Well, that's true, but the other counselors are responsible for their own behavior. Of course, right? And so what I'm saying is that the combination of the rent control question, which I know these people, I thought they had a different feeling about private property, but the fact that they all sat there, many of them have been advocates for the CPA, have never spoken out against a single project.
No.
And then voted against a binding question. Well, and then voted for the non-binding. And how disappointing.
And I didn't, and to Shane's credit, he sat here and he answered some tough questions for like an hour and a half with us, right?
I was very impressed with Shane. He wanted to screw to them.
Yep. I agree. And he
stands on his own 2 feet.
He does. But
everyone is completely wrong.
But it didn't make sense to say, I'm going to vote against this thing I'm putting on the ballot.
Right. No. It was.
You're in a position of power here. You really need to. You're in a position of power here. You can stop something from happening that would be bad. You have to do it.
It was.
This whole consent of the majority thing.
So look, I can't. I know that Councilor Burgo knows parliamentary procedure. We saw him exercise it.
Mm-hmm.
We saw him understand what the power of 1 or 2 votes were when it came to the Pimentel nomination. And he successfully held up a meeting to prevent the results from going against what he wanted to do and thought he could get the result, better results later. So we understand he knows how to do it. So for the fact that I get that he couldn't admit, I wouldn't expect him to, admit that he was going along with that vote because Linda went along with him on the rent control vote. But that's what happened.
Right.
I believe.
And the thing is that if you're doing that, right, it's the definition of penny wise, pound foolish, right?
Right.
You get your non-binding ballot question, but in turn, you are building momentum to kill something that's going to be funding housing.
Absolutely. No. I mean, look,
it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know when he realized it. Might have been in the studio.
Yeah, I don't want to.
The contradictions.
Look, there were a few other counselors that voted against this, so I don't want to beat up on Shane.
There's a ton of that's my point.
Yeah, I don't want to beat up on Shane.
I don't want to put it all on Linda because she's pushing her agenda forward, and these other people are just following her.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense. It was Counselor.
But they're going to have a chance to redeem themselves.
They're going to have a chance to redeem themselves. Counselor Baptiste, Counselor Pereira. Counselor Burgo,
right,
and one more. I forget the last.
And those guys have constituents that need housing,
right? They all switched their vote from the binding to the
non-binding.
Non-binding, and
which as Linda said right afterwards, to her credit, she said to all the counselors, "Now remember, we have to do what the voters say."
Right. So it's the same thing.
Right.
She's doing that, but it's the same thing. It doesn't make any sense to change your mind on that.
No, because the vote is going to have the same impact.
And they're going to say, "Oh, if it's 49-51, then we won't do it." It's like, well,
binding or non-binding. Once the voters have spoken, and you ask them, you damn sure better vote the way they tell you.
Because even if it's 50.1%, guess what? Council President and the people on her side, the few people that, from what I gather, I really haven't heard anybody else, but the few people that are on her side are going to say the majority is the people.
Well, not only that, if you're a city councilor and those are the only ones who are going to have the vote, and the voters have given you a mandate to take a direction, you should go in that direction. That's why you don't ask the question.
Yeah.
Right? That's why you don't ask the question. Now, again, I don't mind polling the voters. But to do 3 questions, Marcus, without a history of anything building up to it.
That's the other thing. Like I've said before, at least questions on housing have the very palpable and salient issue of the housing shortage and lack of affordability and availability of housing. supporting it to a certain degree. But the other two just fell from the sky. Like, I remember Adam Bass came here and he said, oh, she wanted the CPA, the CP. I'm like, wait, the Community Preservation Act?
Right.
Wait, what? Like, that literally fell from the sky.
So,
not
Mark,
literally, but it did.
We're going to get some vetoes from the mayor this week. I think there's some really interesting news. And again, you know a tree by its fruit. It is the news on the bonds, the bond rating for the city of New Bedford.
Yeah.
Now normally this is not, it's dry stuff for most of you. I happen to like it, and most of you at home should like it for the reason that the better your bond rating, the lower it costs to borrow money, and you must borrow money. All municipalities must borrow money. So you're paying a lot less money to borrow money.
Well, so, yeah, let's just explain what exactly we're talking about.
So
it's basically Standard & Poor's sustained the city's bond rating. They said they've been very strongly fiscally managed.
Right, very strongly fiscally managed, and the documents are available. Now, when you read through the things, folks, it tells you not what I say, not what the Republicans, not what the Democrats say. This is an agency, Standard & Poor's, which goes over municipalities all over the country and giving them grades for what they think what you're likely to be able to repay the bonds, right? It sets the risk level, all of that stuff, which for those of you that follow that, and I think many of you do, most of you own bonds, even if you don't realize it. Contrast that with the Credit Suisse bonds. As I was telling Marcus, he doesn't follow these markets as much as I do. Credit Suisse yesterday, Sunday.
What's Credit Suisse?
It's
for people who
the
don't
largest
know?
bank in Europe. One of the largest in the world.
Switzerland.
Yeah, they're a Swiss-based bank, the largest in the world. Ton of business here in America.
Mm-hmm.
They took bonds worth $18 billion. They took $18 billion in cash. They owed the money on those, the interest rates, and they zeroed them out to zero in conjunction with the Swiss government. So
they said they weren't paying them.
They're not paying them. $18 billion gone.
And what does that mean?
That means $18 billion gone into the sunset, right? It's just gone. So that means if it's in your pension fund, if it's part of your 401k, it's gone, okay? You're not getting the money. So that is the possibility anytime you buy a bond. There are varying grades, varying things. Now, these were high yields, but the point being is that the agencies that rate bonds pay attention to what they're rating so that when the bonds go out on the market, they can tell you whether you should invest and how much you should pay for those bonds. Marcus, a number of years ago, but not that long ago, the city of Detroit went belly up. They had all that money out there. Their bonds, they had to do a lot of fiscal management and readjustment. But the point being is that when you read these documents, they're not saying, I like John Mitchell, he's my neighbor, he bought my kid an ice cream cone at the Portuguese feast. It's not that. They're saying we're an independent rating agency. We've come in, we've looked at all the documents, we've looked at the plans for the city of New Bedford, the debt of the city of New Bedford, the economy of the city of New Bedford, and the management, being the mayor and his team. And we agree that this is an extremely safe place to place your money, to buy the bonds, right? It's due to John Mitchell's management and the people he's hired and brought in and the fiscal discipline he's imposed in the city. And
one of they said, they talked, I guess, mentioned specifically the economic benefits of offshore wind.
So and the fact that he's diversifying the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look, folks, I get that John Mitchell's not doing that all alone. You, the taxpayers who pay your bills every month, that's a big part of it. That's right.
Yeah.
The fact that you don't have a lot of delinquents, the fact that the economy through the private industry, through the private sector, is diversifying, making moves in different directions. That's all very, very important. So that's on you guys in conjunction with the mayor. Now, let's contrast this, Marcus, in terms of the city of New Bedford, in conjunction with the city council, is borrowing millions of dollars for worthwhile projects.
Yeah.
All right. So because of the really strong bond rating, they're able to pay a lot less for the money.
Yes.
Millions of dollars, quite frankly. Contrast that with Linda Morad's stunt on the CPA.
Right.
Where she goes, I can save you $7 a quarter by getting rid of this program. That's what she's angling for.
Yeah.
Whereas...
And that $7 that you spend in taxes has got at least a 40% match from the state.
Right.
Plus all the money that comes in from private, from NGOs and private industry.
And look, none of that is in this latest bond rating.
Yeah.
I want people to understand that. Because
none of the pay raises.
Right. None of the pay raises. None of these stunts, shenanigans. Yeah. All right. Because they take the real estate, obviously, because that's what most of the revenue is based off. Mm-hmm. Into consideration. Whatever this rent stabilization, rent control proposal is going to do, it's not reflected yet in the bond documents.
Right.
But that's messing with a major part of the economy.
Yeah.
And whether you support it or not.
Given the process of how we would need to do it, I don't know and I don't know much about this, but given the process of how a rent control or rent stabilization or sort of rent restriction would be enacted in New Bedford, it'd have to go through the state and all that. Would that even be reflected in the bond rating if this ballot question moves forward?
In the future?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
If the proposal went through.
Okay.
No, the question alone.
Yeah.
But the question itself.
Musing aloud about it doesn't.
Well, it does indicate a trend.
Okay.
To the bond, because again, the bond documents look at the past and they trend the future. Mm-hmm. They say, if such and such continues, we wouldn't relook at the bonds. One of the things when you read in the documents, they give an upside, downside potential.
Sure.
They go, one downside is that if certain fiscal controls are not kept in place, then we would reassess. Okay? So if you suddenly have a referendum question by the city council about a major change to the economics of the city, it would indicate a trend. Mm-hmm. Then they would make the assessment on that. So, but other things like the pay raises, canceling of the matching funds from the state, which then go into projects for housing, things like that. When you look in those documents, Marcus, they actually talk about an additional 450 units of housing coming online.
Right.
That's in the documents. Yeah. That's how specific they get. By the way, that's John Mitchell's additional 450 housing in conjunction with the private sector, in conjunction with CPA funds,
right,
ARPA funds. When you start messing around with these fiscal programs, the bonds people understand that, yes, a portion of that's coming from the local taxpayers, but a portion of it's matching funds from the state.
Yeah.
And you're messing that up.
Right.
Right? So, folks, what I'm telling you is that these questions are very serious.
They can be disruptive to the fiscal health of the city.
Right. And they're being used so recklessly. I mean, listen, I am disturbed to the core. And I couldn't be more disappointed in Linda Morad, who understands all of this.
Yeah.
And knows.
She's a banker.
A banker.
Yeah.
She's a banker. Right. She knows. Now, look, Shane Burgo is a young man and a brand new counselor. He's used as a defense, and I don't think that's a legitimate point.
Yeah.
That's why you don't ever have a whole brand new city council, right? Mm-hmm. You get new people, you matriculate into the old people. You hope they bring fresh ideas, and you hope that anyway. So it's surprising that he was able to get Linda, but she so hates the mayor.
Yeah.
She so hates the mayor.
Yeah.
And that she got them.
Yeah.
She changed. Folks, what I'm telling you, give us a call, 508-996-0500. We'll be back.
508-996-0500 is how you get the program. Also taking messages on the WBSM app chat. Wally New Bedford says, great show, guys. Had an interaction with Tim. Listen, if you've got a issue with another host, I would suggest you ask them. I can't.
Right. Yeah, we don't do that.
Yeah, I can't do much about it.
We like reading the app chat.
I appreciate you asking. I appreciate people messaging and listening. But we're a team here.
We're nobody else's assassin.
No, people people come, and I'm sure with Barry too, it's the same thing. People come up to me, that Barry Richard, because I'm the liberal guy, right? And then
people say it to me about you.
Yeah, never exactly. Yeah. So I'm saying, I'm sure people go, Marcus Farrow, and so I'm like, no.
They go, I thought you took an oath to kill communists, not to promote them on the air.
Yeah. Well, when you first had me on as a guest, you said you were lectured by somebody to not have me on anymore.
Tons of people. Not one. It would have been easy if it was one.
508-996-0500 is how you get in the program. Thanks to Wally in New Bedford for listening. We do appreciate it. We'll also take your messages on the WBSM app chat. But he does have a question. If rent control comes in, what happens when a tenant doesn't pay rent or destroys the apartment? They go to housing court to evict them. I don't actually, we talked about this. I don't actually agree that that's the right thing to do. Is if you have a bad experience with one tenant, you jack up rent on your other tenants to make up that cost.
Well, you have the luxury of not having to have that opinion.
Yeah, right.
Because, seriously, I think that it's business. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people get housing and business confused. It's the housing business. And you're not renting a room from your grandmother, and it's not, you and your friends commingling in a house.
Yeah.
It's a business. And if people trash the apartment, you've got to bring it up to code. You've got to recoup that investment.
Yeah.
And the way you're going to do it is by finding a tenant who likes the apartment enough to pay the rent you're asking. It's not the rent that you want to charge, it's the rent you must charge. And the other thing too, Marcus, and I've heard this talked about quite a bit on the other programs, is that the banks decide ultimately what you're going to charge for rent. You pay for the house based on a formula, the cap rate. Mm-hmm. Based on the formula of what the units are going to bring in or can bring in. And then you go into business with the bank who you borrowed the money from. The bank says to you, how much do you think you can get for these units? You say, I want to get this much. They come back and say, you got to get X number of dollars per unit or we can't lend you the money.
Yeah.
That's it. It's not, you say, well, yeah, but I really want to help out people. Well, then start a nonprofit. But, if you're going to the banks for a loan, you've got to agree to their formula. That's the way it is. It's a math problem. So, anyway, the issue on the rent control, Marcus, that I have is beyond the idea of rent control. It's that how can you put a question on the ballot with no details?
Yeah.
How can you ask someone their general opinion of a complex issue?
Yeah, I agree.
And again, it is just a ruse.
And it's something that happens on it happens on state ballots and stuff too, and I don't agree with it then. I don't like the fact that we had to vote on the immigrant driver's license bill. I don't like the fact that we had to vote on the nursing union question because we were voting on, and that was the nurses union's fault actually.
Right.
But still, I didn't like the fact that we had to vote on
What about
that.
The dental care thing?
The dental care thing was insane.
So, Marcus, it's funny, and I'm a nerd, I get it, but I kept the book. Mm-hmm. Secretary of State's book. I had no reason to keep it. I had no idea what would come up. But it's funny because I was looking through the ballot questions that we voted on last year.
Yeah.
How complex, how long they were.
Yeah.
Not 1-2 sentences.
Mm-hmm.
These long, complex questions. Which, again, I don't think a lot of those questions should be on the ballot.
They all have explanations, but who's going to sit there in a voting booth?
But at least you had one.
Yeah.
This one, we don't even have one.
Right.
They go, basically what they're saying is, would you like to have lower rent? We're not going to tell you how.
Yeah.
But would you like in this, and why not put a question on there? Would you like a pet unicorn? Would you like to have a leprechaun clean your car every day? Yes, I would like a pet unicorn and a leprechaun.
Well, the thing is I understand the want to build to sort of build consensus around a topic, and we have seen states and cities very close to us pass rent control recently. So But when they did that, they didn't just ask people, do you want to do it?
The city council did it.
Mayor Wu did it, and the city council pretty much agreed with her on it, right? Yeah. So in Boston, Michelle Wu had a proposal. The city council pretty much agreed with it. Mayor Wu signed it, and it's going in front of the home rule petition, going through the home rule petition process where it will be put out to pasture. But they did it. They just did all that because
they didn't do it in one night.
And they also didn't feel the need to ask people because
they're leaders.
Because they felt as though it was an issue.
And more than an issue, they felt as though they had the expertise, whether they did or they didn't, but they feel like they did some work on it.
Look, I hate to beat up on those questions and beat up on the counselors that proposed them. It's not something I enjoy doing. But the point I'm trying to make is you can't just ask people a bunch of stuff and then say this is governance. It's not.
No.
We've been going back and forth on this, and I actually agree with Shane on more things than I agree with Chris on. And so what I think should be done is just make a proposal, get people in that know what they're doing, talk to them, and see what you can come up with if that's what you want to move towards. Because I think it's something that he wants to do.
So Marcus, by the way, we don't disagree on that. We disagree on the end result. But that's called government.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a process. No matter what you come to the end, how you come up in the end, but there is a process by which you get to solutions in government.
And again, I would be more sympathetic to the ballot question about the rent restrictions if it wasn't coupled with these, because it's addressing a serious issue. The other two are just silly catharsis exercises in catharsis.
Well, but Marcus, I think putting it that way takes away some of the seriousness from it, because they're serious issues. They're just approaching them very unseriously.
Yeah.
Because what they're doing is they're possibly going to interrupt a major flow of state funding to the city of New Bedford.
Mm-hmm.
The CPA, what they're doing is they're starting down the road to doing that.
Yeah.
By telling people we can for nothing we can cut your taxes.
Yeah, right.
It's not true.
Yeah.
But just like telling them for nothing, we can cut your rent. It's crazy.
We're going to take a break.
1420 WBSM, where freedom of speech lives. You don't have to stick by your radio to hear all of South Coast Tonight. Stream Chris and Marcus on the WBSM app or download their podcast. South Coast Tonight continues now.
508-996-0500. We're here. Marcus Farrow, Chris McCarthy on South Coast Tonight. We're here till 10, so stay tuned. We're going to take another break. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to the show.
But I don't do 9 to 5s, Chris. I don't.
You don't do 9 to 5.
I do 7 to 10s.
Right. 7 to 10. 7 to 10.
I do 7 to 10s.
If this doesn't work out, there's always 7-11.
There's always 7-11. Yeah.
So the
got options.
The fact is, Marcus, just to circle back, the Mayor Mitchell has the reason that we give him a lot of credit here on the station because he's earned the credit.
Well,
I'm giving him the credit because an independent financial agency has rated his performance to be worth people's hard-earned money.
Well, I don't have a hard time disagreeing with Mitchell on stuff. It's just there's some issues in which he's been right, and lately he's been right about a lot of stuff.
Right. And look, that doesn't mean he's infallible, but it just means that I'm going to give the man the benefit of the doubt whenever when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
Because he's proven himself.
Well,
to be the responsible man with a tiller.
And there's a Go ahead.
Linda Morad, I used to really, really respect her abilities and didn't always agree with her on stuff. But it's the fact that I agreed with her and respected her intelligence and her experience is the reason why I'm so infuriated by what I'm seeing today and in the last couple of weeks with the pay raise issue. She knows better than that.
Yeah.
She knows better. They're trying to abolish the CPA when she's never raised the issue yet rubber stamped, as far as I can tell, all of the allotments of funding.
Right.
Not a single objection.
None.
And by the way, Marcus, I could find, if I found them, she certainly could find them, some things, some projects, some aspects of projects that certainly could be objected to.
Sure.
But the balance of them is in the net positive.
Yeah.
Right? So it is out of an abundance.
And there's hardly a record of that from any counselor.
None. Not even hardly. None.
Yeah.
None. In fact, so the fact that you're going to have the voters of New Bedford being asked to make complicated decisions with very little information. That's what they're going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
For Shane and Berto to say, I'm going to hold a public hearing after the fact. I mean, I guess that's helpful. Every piece of information is helpful. But all of this time has gone by without anything on the housing.
Yeah.
And without anything on the record. And all this time has gone by without any objection. Years the CPA has been there. It's one of John Mitchell's signature accomplishments.
Yeah.
I know it's been years, Marcus, because when it first passed, I had him up to Boston Herald Radio to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
And that was years ago.
Right.
It was probably 2016 that I had him up there for that. Maybe earlier. So the fact that millions of dollars over the course of many, many years have gone right in front of the city council and been approved. And now suddenly they're voting for a non-binding resolution.